It's a sentence we've heard too many times that we care to remember during this lockdown. South Africa's economy is indeed in crisis, with many having lost income due to the pandemic, some having their salary cuts and some not earning a salary at all. It's been a real trying time, and understandably, as many South Africans have focused on their immediate financial needs, what about our long-term financial needs and challenges that await us? How do we face those? For advice, let's cross now to personal finance columnist Maya Fisher-French, who is no stranger to our viewers here on ENCA. Maya, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I was taken by tweets from your social media platform earlier this week, where you decided to approach that horrible R word, retirement. It's something that I normally put my head in the sand about, because it's very depressing to think about the fact that our generation might not be able to retire as once was the case. But you sat in on a webinar that you felt the need to say what you're hearing is quite scary about what South Africans face in terms of their retirement investments as a result of the pandemic. Talk to us about what was the most startling statistics that came at you this week.
Yes, I've got my tweet in front of me so I can remind myself. But I think what was scary about this is we're saying in light of the pandemic. This had nothing to do with the pandemic. This research that they spoke about was before COVID. So I want to tell you, we were in a bad way. Before COVID, before lockdown, we were in a very bad way. And this was actually a survey conducted by Sanlam as part of their retirement fund survey every year. So they surveyed existing retirees, so people who were already in retirement. 51% of them were not making ends meet. 51% of retirees are not making ends meet. 33% could not meet their medical expenses, and 53% of them were still supporting adult dependents. So I think for me, I just looked at these numbers and I thought, we all know it's bad. We always say X% of South Africans won't be able to retire with sufficient money and all of this, but these are people living it. These are people now in retirement who can do nothing about it. They can't go out and say, well, let's save a little bit more whilst we're saving for retirement. It's over, right? You're in retirement. This is your pot, and you're not making it. And I think for me, that was very, very scary. And it's something that us still moving towards retirement really need to reflect on.
Well, speaking of which, in as much as those were the numbers before lockdown, a lockdown and the impact thereof will have an even worse impact on those numbers as well. We spoke a few weeks ago about what South Africans should be doing right now to manage their funds. And some are getting less funds in because of salary cuts, because of lack of income. You have spoken at length about the fact that we need to double check the fine print when it comes to these bond repayment holidays and that kind of thing. And I suppose your advice would be similar when people are considering actually cutting back on their retirement annuity as well, as a way to make ends meet during this difficult time.
Definitely. I think what I see is that people go for the quick fix, right? It's not about, let me go through my budget, let me see what expenses I can cut. It's as in my day-to-day spending, maybe I can tighten up on the groceries, maybe I don't need this or that, or I must be honest, I'm running around switching lights off a lot at the moment. For some reason, my electricity bill's gone through the roof. It freaks me out. We don't do that because it's easier to cancel a debit order. So we just say, oh, you know what, I'll put my retirement funding on pause for a bit. Because that just, it's an easy thing to do. And the impact of that, as we've just seen, is enormous, because the people that are retiring now in retirement didn't go through COVID and they didn't have enough money for retirement. So what does it leave us with? And what we're also seeing is a lot of employers, because they're cutting salaries, people are obviously going to be taking home less. They've said to them, listen, you don't have to contribute to your pension fund for the next couple of months until you come back to work. So that is also part of the, I would say problem. I mean, obviously it's a safety net right now. People may not genuinely, especially if you had an actual salary cut. But you've really got to go back after this if you have stopped adding money into your retirement and find out how you're going to close that gap.
And for younger people who perhaps for retirement seems like another lifetime away, those first few years of contributions to your retirement annuity is extremely important, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, literally, I think about a third of your income that you will receive in retirement is literally from the first 5 years that you start investing. And that's because of compounding, because money doubles every 7 years. So every additional 7 years that you are investing for basically doubles your money at retirement. I mean, the numbers are, when I do those numbers on Money Matters, it just, even for me, it still amazes me the difference between starting to save or invest at 25 versus even 30. Those 5 years make an enormous difference. So it's easy to say, oh, I'll worry about retirement later, but you save yourself so much work if you start early, because you actually have to put in substantially less to have the same amount in retirement than somebody who starts later. So it is something you need to start thinking about.
It's very easy to sit and give this kind of advice because we know it is the right thing to do. But in practice, it is very difficult, especially if you look at the heavy lifting being done by so many ordinary South Africans. You're sitting with a generation of South Africans who are indeed looking after their parents, whose retirement planning, unfortunately, is not able to sustain them, and not of their own fault, because of South Africa's history, socioeconomic and otherwise. And at the same time, they also need to be taking this advice to plan for their own future. Is it difficult then for you to be able to give this advice, knowing that South Africans have so much on their plate right now, but for their own good, these are the difficult decisions that need to be made?
I mean, I think there's two ways to answer that. The first one is, I think we also need to accept that everybody assumes they're going to retire at 60. That seems to be this number. I can tell you, A, you're not going to be able to afford to retire at 60. And secondly, we're living so much longer. We're living till 90. And I think one of the big conversations that's starting now is whether or not the age of 60 is an appropriate retirement date, or whether we should be looking actually at 70. And if you start changing your mindset a little bit about that and thinking about it as a young person, start thinking about the second career. Even for me, I don't, I have to be honest, I have got my retirement on track because I talk about it enough times. I better do it. But I don't really see myself like at 60 kind of putting my feet up. I mean, I've got a long way ahead of me. So I think it's also about planning and saying, what am I going to be doing with my life? Is there a second career? Is there something else that I will be able to do with my skills that I can do for longer? And maybe I don't want to be sitting behind this desk forever with an employer, but what can I do? So start thinking about retirement differently, not just as that pot that you've saved for, but possibly something that you can skill up for and have as they actually call it a second life. That is in America. You know, America always got good tax. They call it the second life. And so I think that's the first thing I would really recommend to young people who are feeling like, oh, what am I going to do? And the other one is to prioritize. I know you've got lots of bills. I mean, we all do. But even if it's a small amount, it's just that little bit that you start putting away that's for yourself. And I think that's the most fantastic thing. I have to tell you, my son said something to me the other day, and he said, Mom, don't scare people by telling them that they're not going to have any money one day and be poor. Tell them that they're saving to be able to sustain their lifestyle. And I thought that was actually, that's from a 16-year-old, I thought. So I thought that's good advice. That's what the young people should be thinking. He's a young person.
Yeah, it's all about how you form your statement, Mum. I think is what he's trying to say. Let's be proactive. Thank you so much, as always. And it wasn't doom and gloom, so you can tell your son you've done well. Personal finance columnist Maya Fisher-French, and I suppose 65-year-old Marcel might still be sitting here bringing you the headlines on a Saturday morning, according to what Maya has just been telling us.